Hey everybody, this is the Marine with Backpacking with a Hammock. One piece of gear that you're always going to need when you're backpacking is some type of cooking stove. There's so many different types and styles of cooking stoves on the market today. If you're just beginning to start backpacking, it could be really confusing on which stove would work best for you. Now in the second episode of Backpacking 101, we're going to break those stoves down into 5 different categories. The first one being pressurized liquid multi-fuel stove, which is also known as white gas. The second one is a gas canister or a cartridge stove. The third one is a liquid gas stove, which is also known as alcohol stove. The fourth one is an alternative fuel stove, which is just basically a small wood burning stove. And the last one, the fifth one, is a solid fuel stove. And we're also going to look at the pros and cons to find out which stove would work best for you. Some might say, why don't you cook over an open fire, which I love to do, but sometimes the conditions are not favorable, like heavy rain, or if I'm just hiking down the trail and I want to stop to have a quick meal, or a cup of coffee or hot chocolate. Having the right stove can make your trip so much more enjoyable. Now the first stove we're going to look at is pressurized liquid multi-fuel stove, which I call white gas. Now this is the most versatile stove of all for cooking, and an MSR WhisperLite Universal stove can burn different types of fuel like white gas, kerosene, gasoline, and also diesel. Now this stove would be great for planning a trip internationally, so you don't have to worry what type of fuel will be available for you. Completely insert the brass end of the fuel line into the pump. Secure the catch arm on the fuel pump groove. Unfold the pot support legs. Place fuel bottle on its side so the pump control valve points up. Pump about 10 times. Open pump control valve to release only a half spoonful of fuel into the priming cap. Then close the pump control valve. Light the fuel in the priming cap. A brief ball-sized flame is normal. Wait for the preheat flame to reduce in size, which is approximately 2 minutes. Open the pump control valve and wait for a steady blue flame. Then pump to get more pressure in the canister fuel tank. Then you are ready to cook. Use a windscreen to block the wind, but it also helps to intensify the heat for cooking faster. They're great when being used for 2 or more people. They can be used from simmering to bringing water to a boil, which is faster than any of the stoves we'll be looking at. They work very well in cold temperature. And when I winter camp, this is a stove I'll use when I'm pulling a poke. And when I have to melt snow to boil water, this is a stove that works well for that. And that's why it's a favorite with the mountain guides and people on expeditions. Now the cons on this stove is you have to have a little bit of knowledge to run this stove because you have to prime it before you use it. And they're a little expensive. They're about $100 for the stove. When you use other than white gas, it may have a tendency to clog. You have to have regular maintenance on it to keep it going for over the years. And they're a little bit heavy and bulky for backpacking. Now the second stove we're going to look at is a canister or a cartridge stove. Now the stove that I'm using is a Snow Peak GigaPower. First you take the cartridge, remove the cap, take the stove out. Then you want to screw it on top of the cartridge with a canister. Then you want to open it up. Some will have a starter, or you just use a lighter. Then you open the valve. They're lightweight, fairly packable. They're really popular with lightweight backpackers and for short trips. They're easy to use. And to turn the stove off, you just turn the valve off. They boil water fairly quickly, not as quick as white gas. You can find the cartridges in most department stores or some hardware stores, and they go for around $10. Now the cons on the stove, they don't work well in winter time when the temperature drops well below freezing. They tend to freeze. And they don't work well in windy conditions because the manufacturer does not provide a windscreen, and the reason is because the windscreen can cause the canister to overheat, which may lead to an explosion, which is not good. And they can be a little expensive. They're around $50 for a stove. And the cartridges can be a little bit bulky. Another con with the canister stove is knowing how much fuel is in the canister. And I'm going to show you a little trick that'll give you an idea how much fuel is in these tanks. Now the first thing you want to do, which is very important, is to find out where the bottom of the tank is. This is not the bottom. Most canisters, the bottom is concaved, and this one's really deep, and some are even deeper. So if I was to put my finger there and mark it where it is, you can see it comes out that high on there. So what you want to do is find out where the bottom of the tank is, and I estimate it to be right here. Next, you get a pail and you fill it up with water. Take the canister, put it in the water, but you want to put it in an angle because at a concaved end, you want to get the air out. Now you can see that the water is just kind of in the middle of that G, and the line is right below it. So this tank is almost empty. Now this is a full tank, and we'll put that in the same way. Now you can see that this canister is almost full to the top. There's always a little space in there. They never fill these canisters to the top. Now the third stove we're going to look at is a liquid fuel stove, which is an alcohol stove. Pour the fuel in. Some stove will have a priming ring on there. You can light the wicking material, or you can light it inside. Now as you can see, you can barely see the flame on here, so you just bring your hands down just close enough to feel the heat to see if it is lit. And this is a favorite among ultralight backpackers because it's lightweight, they only weigh a few ounces, they're packable, inexpensive. And if you're into making your own things DIY, these stoves are really easy to make. Thru hikers tend to favor the stove because the denatured alcohol is inexpensive and readily available. So if there's no special outdoor stores around, you can always find fuel. And they're just basically for boiling water for dehydrated or freeze-dried food. Now the cons of the stove is you can't control the flames, but they do come with simmer rings, and you have to have a little bit of knowledge as far as how many ounces of fuel to boil how many ounces of water. Now the rule of thumb on most alcohol stove is 1 ounce of fuel will boil 2 cups or 16 ounces of water. My fuel bottles, I'll mark 1 ounce lines on the bottle. This is a 4 ounce bottle. You can see I have 4 ounces and 4 lines on there for measuring the alcohol. Or you can use a measuring cup. Now the fourth stove we're going to look at is the alternative, or the wood burning stove. Now this wood burning stove is a solo stove. This is on the heavy side. Bush Buddy has a stove that's half the weight, but it costs a little bit more. So if you're backpacking, that makes a better stove. When starting the stove, I'll always use some type of fire starter. I'll put small sticks in there to feed the fire. Then I'll start feeding it larger pieces of wood. Once you get it going, put the pot on there. On this particular stove, there's holes on the bottom which draws air up, cause it sort of a gasification. Then to continue to feed it, you just put sticks through that little gap there. They're fairly lightweight, and mainly because you don't have to carry any fuel. The fuel is around you. You just have to forage for burnables along the trail. Now the cons on this stove is that there's 0 temperature control, and it takes a long time to boil water. And when burning wood, you're at the mercy to the environment, and if the environment is wet, it'll be difficult to find dry fuel. And on much of the public land in America West, there's often temporary fire bans, which makes this stove illegal to use. And lastly, expect to have a completely sooty pot. Now the fifth and the last is a solid fuel stove. Now these are just basically chemical tablets that are easy to use. Now you want to put the solid fuel tablet on something that's not burnable like tin foil. You don't even need a stove, you can just take rocks, put them down there, put the pot on top of there. With that being said, they're very inexpensive and lightweight. While serving the United States Marine Corps, I used these for many years to heat up my sea rats. Now the cons on this stove, it takes a long time to boil water, and you can't control the temperature unless you move the pot closer to the flame. And it may leave a little bit of residue on your pot, and the chemical fuel does have a horrible smell. Except for the canister or cartridge stove, you would always want to use some type of windscreen like this carbon fiber or some type of metal. It'll cook faster and burn better with the windscreen. Well, I hope this video has helped you on deciding which stove would work well for you. In the next episode of Backpacking 101, we're going to look at the proper way to pack your backpack, so on your next trip it'll be a little more enjoyable. If you like this video, please click the like button down below and share. If you found this video to be helpful and insightful, please hit that subscribe button. But if you want to be notified, you got to hit that little bell on the right hand side. But more important, if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. This is the Marine with Backpacking with a Hammock. Thank you for watching, and God bless.